Good afternoon, everyone. So I want to welcome everyone to today's What the Observer Sees. Today we have a very special guest alongside with myself and Bob. We have Ashish Kumar from LeadPro, all the way from India, joining in. And we've got a very interesting topic that we're going to be covering. Bob, you want to introduce the topic and then we can kind of get into it?
Yep, sure. So, thanks, Arun. So, welcome everybody. Today we'll be discussing soft skills, a very, I would say, interesting and important skill in today's industry, and as well as how do games actually address these points. So, yeah, over here we have Ashish from Lead Pro, right? So, glad to have you on board in the show today. Ashish, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. First of all, thank you a lot, Bob, for inviting me for this show. And let me introduce myself. So, I'm a founder of a company called LeadPro. It's a startup, and we are primarily into gamifications. It's been 8 years, and we have been recognized as top 10 global simulation companies. We have more than 20 plus simulations in our portfolio, and we cater to a lot of behavioral as well as business aspects using simulation, which is nothing but a game-based learning methodology.
Right. So that's very interesting. I mean, can you just tell me why you decided to get into gamification as a method of learning for LeadPro? Like, what made you choose this approach versus your very standard learning and development organization tends to focus on classroom-based stuff? Like, what was it that made you choose this?
So one of the reason like why we started was my passion for games.
Right.
So I loved games and I used to play a lot of games.
Yeah.
Now whenever we play games, there was one thing which was very strong was that we learn a lot from that particular game. It could be any game like physical game or an online game. Even if you're playing a game, we need to understand what is the characteristics or why does a human being play a game. The first reason is, of course, and I think anybody can say is because games are very engaging.
Yeah.
We play a game, we get hooked to it.
Right.
But is engagement the only reason why I play a game or why anybody else play a game? If you actually dig deeper, the reason is appreciation.
Okay.
Now, why appreciation? Why do I want to play a game? Is there's a challenge. As human beings, we love to solve some challenges.
Yeah.
And the back end, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to create an appreciation for myself that yes, see, I can do this thing. Now take an example, let's say just solve a Sudoku or solve a cross puzzle or just solve anything. Why does the people solve it? Because he wants to show to himself or to others that see, I can do this, I can take this challenge, I can solve this challenge, and I get a sense of appreciation, a completeness that yes, I have done something. And similarly, if you see in a game, what you have is every game will have an objective, a milestone that you
Yeah.
have to reach. And why do people play? Now, let's take an example of a Candy Crush saga. I am sure all of us must have
Sure.
played that game.
Yeah.
Now, why
Right.
did somebody kept on playing that game? The reason was the level at which you were into. So I am at level 424, and suddenly I heard somebody's at level 600, somebody's at 800. So the instinct to cross that levels and solve every level and reach to the top, that what makes games so engaging. And why do people keep on playing a certain game? Because they want to solve a challenge, they want to clear a level. And often you will see that once some, like for example, let's say if I'm playing something and I have crossed level 1, I would want to play level 2.
Yeah.
And there's less passion to solve or play level 1 again.
Right.
Right? If engagement was the answer,
Yeah.
then I would have wanted to play level 1 again and multiple times. So that's the context wherein we thought that okay, now what we'll do is we'll use a basic game based concept because they are very engaging. And as you can see, the primary underlying factor is that people want to solve a challenge. And in corporates, what we do is we are day in day out, we are just solving challenges. So that's
Okay.
where we wanted to make a marriage between game and the way being learning is being done. So we wanted to make it engaging, and that's how all our games, if you see, they have an objective in our mind. And as a participant, let's say if you are completing a game, you know what you need to achieve at the end of the game.
Yeah.
That is what keeps you hooked up, and that's where you want to complete the game and finish it off, and then see how well did you achieve.
Yeah, so I can completely relate. I think for me also the excitement of playing a game is to accomplish that end goal, right? That end mission. And in the process, learning that required skill set is really where the game shines through, right? So my question in, coming back to soft skills and that notion of how games can address soft skills, you started LeadPro about 8 years ago, so you have quite a lot of context or quite a lot of history over the last 8 years. How have you seen games addressing soft skills, and how has it evolved over the last 8 years? When you started LeadPro till today, in today's world, has anything changed in respect to soft skills and gamification?
So in terms of gamification, I'll tell you, when we started
Yep.
8 years back, and in fact, not just 8 years back, if you see 20 years back also, there were a couple of simulations in the market. But any simulation that you pick, the focus was on running a business,
Right.
which is more like a technical skill, that how do you run a business, play a simulation game, and just run a business. It could be a global business, could be a local business, but the focus was on strategy games. And when we started, even we started with the same concept. We started
Sure.
with the strategy games. But
Okay.
later on, having run those games for 3 years, 4 years, we realized that we what we are trying to address is only 5% of the audience. Because the need for behavioral skills, if you see, is humongous.
Yep.
So, and if you see, there are not a lot of games available which imparts you behavioral skills or imparts you soft skills. And if you see, so what we did is we dug deeper in that, that what is it that we require in terms of soft skill. And what we actually figured out that in terms of technical skills, your technical skills will keep upgrading. You have to keep changing it every 10 years, let's say.
Sure.
And nowadays that span has also come down, in fact. But talk about the soft skill have not changed. Even 40 years back, 50 years back, there were some predominant behaviors which are being required, and the same behaviors are required today as well. And if I can sum it for you, there are two behaviors being required. Number one is, how do you deal with people, or how do you work in team, let's say. And
Sure.
the second part is, how do you get things done.
Okay.
Now, this is not competency, but this is like a behavior.
Yeah. So
If
you're
you
you're
see,
you're
yeah,
basically saying that these two pillars, lah. Like
yes,
essentially, most soft skills can fall under these two pillars, lah. Either how do you work with people and how do you accomplish tasks or deliverables, lah. Essentially.
Absolutely. Now, how do you deal with people? You might say that the way people have started to deal might have changed. Before COVID, nobody
Yeah.
nobody ever talked about emotional intelligence, right?
Yeah.
Or empathy. But just look at what COVID has done. Now people start talking about being empathetic, being emotionally intelligent. So how do you deal with people as a pillar? Your competencies might change. You might require some new skills. But still, if you see broader on a broader perspective, those pillars are remain intact.
Okay.
That was the focus on. We thought, okay, we are focusing too much on technical skills, on business skills. Let's come to soft skills. Another thing, if you see, people keep saying that, no, why is simulation being done? The core idea is that instead of doing something in reality, because it's very risky,
Yeah.
you learn and do something in a virtual background.
Yeah.
Now tell me, Arun, what could be more riskier than than breaking a relationship with your colleagues?
Yeah.
Right.
True. Yeah, that's
So
true. Yeah.
right. So what we thought is that, yes, agreed that business is riskier, but maintaining your relationship with your colleagues. Let's say you are a manager and you are managing a couple of people, and you're not able, and let's say you lose trust, your subordinate lose trust in you. And I'm sure you must have also heard that people don't leave organization, they leave their bosses.
Yeah.
Right. So once you create a drift between two people, it's very, very difficult to solve or fill that gap. So what
Okay.
we felt is that, because now dealing with people is also very riskier, and it's a skill which somebody needs to master at, why not create and give them a virtual environment wherein they can practice with virtual people and become better.
Okay.
That was a need which made us focus on making some games for behavioral skills. And that's how the need of simulations on soft skills came into picture. And today I'm very proud to say that we have more than 15 simulations on soft skills, catering to a lot of other various
Yeah.
competencies, like emotional intelligence, you're leading people, motivating people, giving feedbacks. So that's it. Yes.
Cool.
And that is a wonderful story, coming back from when LeadPro just started, and then how it addresses the soft skills market coming into COVID-19, when you saw that, we could actually address this gap, so and so and so forth. So just a quick question to you, Ashish. So you've seen the progression soft skills training, right? Since when you first started LeadPro and then COVID came in, and now that we are going with 15 different simulations, you mentioned either virtual or digital format, right? To tackle several angles of soft skills, right? So how do we achieve similar or in fact better results with simulations which have been programmed digitally or it works virtual as opposed to the physical where people were very accustomed to in the pre-COVID era?
Right. So that's a great question, Bob. And if you look at we the answer is there in the market, and the way market is being shaping today. If you see the entire organization everywhere, people are talking about data,
Right.
isn't it? Now,
Yes.
what we bring is this is exactly what digital simulations bring, and that's data. When you do a physical simulation, okay, irrespective of whatever simulation it is, and how good or bad, we are not talking about that. But in a physical simulation, it is difficult to capture data or behavior of a user.
Yep.
Right.
I do something, okay, there's a facilitator, the facilitator will give me a guide, will help me understand, okay, done. But is my data getting captured? Can the facilitator draw some analytics or do some, can they draw some insights from my data?
Right.
That is
Right.
something which is missing in a physical program. But digital gives us the beauty of storing my data, storing data of the user. Now, if you see all our simulations, we store nothing less than 400 to 500 data points. And what we do is we analyze it because we have already we have made the model. The model in itself analyzes those behavior points and then throws a report, which is a developmental report. Now, this is
Right.
something which is missing in a physical session.
Yeah.
Physical, you can't make a custom report immediately. Instantaneously, you can't do that.
Yeah.
And it's very difficult if somebody, let's say, have to give it. Somebody has to be very, very attentive. You'll have to install at least 5 or 6 cameras. Go
Yeah.
back to the recordings and then look at it and then come with
Yeah.
a feedback. Okay, what has happened, right? But the beauty of digital is that everything gets captured.
Right. Yeah. No, I completely agree with that because I think, on our side, we do run a lot of physical simulations and virtual simulations, which are basically physical simulations run on virtual platforms versus digital. So I think the way digital sims can really add value is that comparison across people as well, because the data points are measured equally, right? You don't have any bias in the data, in a sense, right? You don't have one observer observing something that is completely different from someone else. So the data points on which you measure are standard and across the board. So you can get some good inferences on how the group is doing on versus one individual. So I think that's where it really shines, and especially when you go into large groups of people, that's very helpful because you won't be able to scale physical observations in that manner, right? That's where really digital kind of plays a bigger role. Your thoughts on that?
And in fact, I just like to add one more point, Arun, and that is if we have to look at a solution which is at scale.
Yeah.
A physical can't be replicated to 200 people or 300 people.
Yeah.
Today, if you see, organizations want a solution which can be deployed at scale. Right.
Yes.
If I have to, like, for example, suppose communication is a need and I have to train people on communication skills. Now, I can't wait for 2 years
Exactly.
conducting 40 workshops in a batch of 20 people and doing it. I need something which can be deployed right now. And within 2 months, I want everyone to be, running and going. So there is where digital simulations make a huge impact.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it also takes a certain type of customer to see the value, right? Some customers, I think, in a sense, they are dictated by the participants in terms of their experience. They want that experience of a physical workshop, right? Versus, I need these things fast. I want it scalable, right? So there are always these options available, right? And I think that's where digital simulations kind of complement physical and virtual ones, right? So if I come back to the context of India, where you are from and where the LeadPro was started, right? How have you seen the digitization age kind of evolve, right? Over the last 20 years or so, we've kind of evolved very rapidly. How has that helped you specifically in India to get started, to kind of come up with these amazing solutions? and then take it from India and then kind of go out into the world and kind of share your products and work with international customers. How has the change in India helped you along that journey lah? That's essentially the question.
So, Arun, what we have observed is there are two changes which we have seen wherein
Okay.
India has evolved after COVID. The first change is the number of training programs on soft skills.
Right.
Now, the programs which used to happen before COVID and now there's
Okay.
if not less, there's a threefold increase after COVID. Now, the reason that we have identified is, at times people used to assume that this is a skill which needs to be there. I mean, as an organization, I don't need to teach you. I don't need
Yeah.
to train you on how to work, how to deal with people. Okay, you are supposed to know. That was a mindset of people. But now people understand that no, it is also a part of the organization to impart soft skills. And if you see before COVID, most of the trainings, in fact, 70 to 80% of trainings were mostly on technical skills.
Okay.
But now soft skills have actually taken 50%.
Right.
So you have a mix of both now. 50% soft skills, 50% training is technical skills.
And if I push you a little bit on that, like, so why did COVID kind of be that catalyst? Like, what was the reason why you saw COVID as that catalyst for that shift?
So one of the reasons, see, as I said, like emotional intelligence or empathy. Again, empathy is something which is not something that we need now. Okay, empathy was something which we always needed, right?
Yep.
And so it was assumed that we would show some empathy, we would show some patience. But now, after COVID has made us realize that we do not have that patience. We lack that empathetical skills. I'm just giving you an example on
Yeah.
one skill.
Yeah.
Second part is, if you see, Arun, what is changing is the Gen Z which you have. They simply do not have that patience. They do not have that qualities to be, I mean, to be honest, to be very blunt, they don't have the qualities to lead a team right now. I'll tell you honestly. I have worked with a lot of millennials. I've worked with a lot of youngsters. And what is happening, you see, if you see, the average age has started to come down. Before, like 10 years back, average manager would be of age of 35, let's say.
Yeah.
Today, the manager's age has come down to 30.
Oh,
Now, what that is doing is, as a manager, I am not matured enough to understand how to develop my subordinates.
Right.
I don't have that patience.
Yeah.
Right. So dealing with people, or let's say from a managerial skill point or from a leader skill point, this is something which people have started to realize that we need to now impart, because they don't have it. They completely lack that skill of how to be a leader.
right.
Okay, I think there is a lot of parallels even in Asia, in ASEAN, in Malaysia. I think we do see that as well. The millennials and Generation Z has taken a more prominent role, right, in organizations. So the way they deal with issues is completely different to the generation before them, right? So I think you're right. We are starting to see the same kind of shift here. Um, I wouldn't say so much in the sense that there is a huge shift in terms of technical versus non-technical soft skill training. I would say it's all rising on par lah, in our part of the world. But I really like what you mentioned on COVID and India and how that's helped you. I think that's an insight that is valuable, because for us, I think that India has been a country that has embraced digitization a lot stronger than other countries in the East because of the need to do so lah, to compete, right, on a global scale. Whereas Malaysia, a much smaller country, obviously, we obviously have a kind of a slower adaptation, I would say, even though we might be very mature as a workforce, but I would say because of our size, we tend to lag behind, in some sense. So it's always good to hear that kind of context from another much bigger population size, a much bigger market lah.
And it's also interesting, Ashish, that you brought up the point about taking the time to develop your subordinates, taking the time to develop yourself as well, connecting it with the age today, where people are more on I want it now, I want it instantly, and I want it fast. Right. So, but the thing about learning is sometimes if you want it fast and you want it instantly, sometimes sustaining that engagement over time is probably one of the age-old caveats when it comes to learning in general. So we're talking about apps out there, let's say like Duolingo and Habitica, where all these are great gamification apps in terms of sustaining an activity, whereas let's say learning a foreign language, or not just as simple as three same tasks every day, just keeping yourself engaged. But when we talk about the people of the Gen Z or the Gen Alpha, as they call it, the latest generation, right? So is there a specific magical aspect that you look at when you design games or simulation to keep them engaged in the aspect of learning itself?
Yes, Bob, and you rightly mentioned when you talk about Gen Z, they just want something immediately. They want instant solutions, and the engagement level have actually come down.
Right.
That's the
Right.
reason if
Yeah.
you see, typical 2-day program has now condensed into a 3-hour program.
Mm.
That's the kind of program which we have
Yeah.
started doing. So the programs which we used to do for 2 days, we just have to complete in 3 hours. So now what has happened is, and also they're looking at innovative ways to engage. You can't
Right.
just have one solution. You'll have to
Yeah.
have multiple solutions. So that's where what we focus more on is, and that's where what we call it as a micro learning or micro nuggets.
Micro
So
nuggets.
all our simulations, if you see, when we started off, our simulations were 6 hours long, 8 hours long, 4
Right.
hours long. And we have reduced it drastically to a 30-minute long simulation
That's right.
because they don't have the patience to sit for a 4-hour session and just doing a simulation, a detailed simulation. So we have just brought it down. That's one way that we keep focusing on in terms of our product development, understanding the behavior that they are showing.
Right. I mean, I like that approach. I think there must be some level of option for different audiences, lah, right?
Yes.
It depends whether or not. Sometimes micro sims, like what you mentioned, the ones that go up for 30 minutes, I think there is also a balance between how deep is the upskilling process, like how much can I get out of a 30-minute game versus the engagement and the retention of actually looking at something and saying, oh my god, it's going to take 2 hours, I'm already not interested. Right. So there's always that balance lah. From an organizational standpoint, they would obviously want to prioritize the skilling, right? Like I need my people to learn emotional intelligence. I hope that at the end of this 30-minute session they have enough to get them going lah, right? And then on the other side, you have the participants that don't have the bandwidth or the time or the commitment or the engagement to be able to even do something that is slightly longer lah. So how, in your opinion, how have you managed to balance it? Like, how have you managed to balance that product development mindset to say that yes, we can reduce the time that it takes for somebody to learn something, but in such a way that we don't lose focus, so that the game becomes just a random selection of things and you don't really get the value from the actual simulation. How have you managed to balance that?
So Arun, what we do is, in fact, all our simulations that we make, now we have experts who sit through and who design the entire programs.
Okay.
Now, what we've done is, and that's one of the beauty is, we are highly customizable.
Yep.
And which means that when we have a simulation, typically you will see that people try to fit one simulation in all the audiences. No, it's be a junior audience, senior audience. You have one simulation, you try to fit it. But we believe that one size will not fit everyone.
Yeah.
Right. Even if, let's say, you have any topic, suppose like, for example, empathy. Now, empathy for a junior manager and empathy for a senior manager would not be the same.
Sure.
Even if technically you might say, it's empathy, how does it matter? But it does matter. So what we do is we create different situations. For a younger audience, we have a different situation altogether. For a senior audience, we have a different situation altogether. And
Right.
that's where we have programs which are ideally designed for every cohort. So if you have a younger audience, we have a different simulation for that. Middle managers, we have a different simulation. No, if you are top management, we have a different simulation for that. So that is how we design, and making sure that the complexity does not hamper. Second thing, what we do is, typically when you break it down, like for example, suppose if you have 4 competencies together in one simulation, of course it will be more complex. And if you just handle one competency, it might become a little lesser complex as compared to that. But the idea is that it's not just about complexity, let's say. Even if
Right.
I'm able to give you an awareness about a particular concept, that this is what it is and this is how this is being done, what we have seen is that it works wonders at that level. So whenever we do like complete a simulation, we do a thorough understanding, so we use a design thinking kind of an approach.
Sure.
We run this program for at least 100 or 200 participants. We capture, and as I said, that we use our power of data. So we
Yep.
capture their behavior, we capture their data, we see how have they performed in the simulation and how are they performing in the actual workspace as well. We conduct interviews with them, we understand their behavior, what did they observe in the simulation.
Okay.
So that's how we kind of come to an ideal solution for everyone.
Nice. Very interesting.
Right. And so just to wrap things up a little bit, probably one final question to Ashish, and in fact to Arun as well. Do you have any games in mind that highlights a certain soft skill which is very relevant in today's market?
Ashish, you want to go first? I'm still thinking.
Okay. No, so Bob, if you're asking me, I would keep going on about my simulation, my products, because so
Maybe a B2C game that you have in mind that you love so much, and you would like to share with the world as well.
so a B2C
Yeah.
game, I'll tell you, there was a game, forgot, Call of Duty, sorry, Call of Duty. Now
Okay.
it's a team-based thing,
Yeah.
if you see, and you need to collaborate. That collaboration was the key in that simulation, in that game. And even today, if you see the way teams are working, physical teams have become hybrid teams. There's one word I think in every session that we keep highlighting is collaboration, collaboration, collaboration.
Yeah.
So that's one game which I think Call of Duty, wherein you need a very high level of collaboration, and of course you need a high level of agility. Quick
That's true.
reactions is what need, and again agility, collaboration, these are things which we need in today's world. So that is one game. Apart from that, of course, we have our games that we have.
There must be a plug-in. There must be a plug. No. So I think for me, nothing on the B2C side comes to mind, but then I think like recently I've seen a lot of organizations tend to ask for design thinking simulations, right? Obviously, design thinking is something that is very trending. It is trending a lot these days because I think as we work in different methods like work from home, work from office, hybrid, there needs to be better collaboration in terms of how we brainstorm and come up with products and ideas. So I think a lot of companies are coming around to that idea. So there are a few out there. I've spoken to one in North America, in Toronto. They are based out of that, and they actually work with Stanford, the design school, D school, to come up with a fantastic case study on design thinking, right? And it's not really a game per se. Like it's not like you're in a digital game and you're actually going through a series of steps, but it's quite interesting because it's a case study based and you get into it, and it's quite, in the end of the day, you really learn the steps that are included in design thinking. So those are the ones that I would highlight. I'm not really so much a B2C gamer like Bob and Ashish, so I don't have a lot of context. But if I ask Bob, maybe you can have the last say. I know you have tons. He has tons. Ashish, like he knows so many games. I'm surprised that he actually has time for work.
Yeah, so just like Ashish, I'm also a huge on games. I mean, I've always liked the PC games, but recently I've transitioned into a more tabletop board game as kind of a setting. So recently I played this one game called Nemesis. It sounds a lot more intimidating than the actual gameplay is, but so the gameplay is basically, think of it as Among Us. I'm sure that all of us have heard of this Among Us backstabbing kind of game where we need to collaborate, but to a certain extent. So this game captures that element as well, where you have to go around completing your task, do what you're set out to do. However, they may or may not be a traitor amongst everybody, and the beauty of the game is that it is rigged so much against you that it induced this level of, oh my goodness, I have to not only go up against the board, but I need to go up against a potential traitor. So how do I navigate myself in a very precarious situation? There's a lot of elements in play, like communication, convincing, influencing people to help you out, and also, of course, there's always deception.
Nice. No, I think definitely games, I think, are one of the reasons why we we kind of started evals and started our collaboration with other simulation providers in the region. It's because we feel that, and it's not just what we feel, I think it's also what our participants feel, right? I think the common feedback that we get is that this is a unique experience. I haven't seen anything like this, experienced it, and that shift from the traditional classroom to the more of that digital or virtual setting really helps them stay focused, stay engaged, and in the process learn, right? And I think that's our mission as organizations, to really bring learning and development to the next phase, to make it engaging, immersive, and also unorthodox, right? To use different formats, different methodologies to bring that concept across.